You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
It's spooky season, and you know what that means. It's time for Not So Scary Social Skills. So you may remember last year I did Not So Scary Small Groups. This year I'm doing Not So Scary Social Skills. This is a 4-part video series where I'll be sharing with you how you can teach social skills at each tier, including how to collect data on this topic as well. Social skills is an essential part of school counseling. I'm sure you're getting so many referrals for this topic, and I want to help you master it. So in this free training, I'll help you spice up your social skills sessions by giving you applicable tools and strategies you can use with your kiddos right away. Watch all 4 videos for a special social skills freebie and to earn a PD certificate. Like I said, it's a 4-part video series, a completely free training, and I hope you'll join me for these not so scary social skills. You can sign up at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/scary. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So the next 2 episodes are going to be a little bit different. I'm sharing some not so scary sneak peeks. So as you know, right now I'm doing my Not So Scary Social Skills video series. This is a free video series where I'm sharing all about how you can teach social skills, and it doesn't have to be scary, in class lessons, small groups, individual counseling, and how to collect data as well. Like I said, it's free. You get a freebie for showing up and a PD certificate. So, or not even for showing up. It's a video series. So just for watching them. So go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/scary to sign up today. But today's episode's a little different. I'm going to share the Not So Scary Small Groups, which was a similar training we did last year. Last year was small groups. This year's social skills. So I'm going to play one of those videos for you guys, just so you can kind of, get a refresher, learn something new. Maybe you did the Not So Scary Small Groups last year, or maybe you didn't. It is no longer available, so I thought this would just be like a fun freebie refresher, and we can talk about small groups. So I will be playing one of the videos, the audio from one of the videos of last year's Not So Scary Small Groups. Okay, let's check it out. Today, I'm going to talk to you all about how you can engage your students with your small group curriculum. This is a fun one. This is my favorite video of the series, probably. I'm going to give you ideas for icebreakers, activities, and some reflection pieces. So it's really great. Let's get started. So like I said, small groups don't have to be scary. I'm going to show you how you can spice up your group counseling sessions so you can engage your students and measure your program's progress. And remember, if you watch all 4 videos in this series, you'll get a special group freebie. So I'm giving away one of my favorite small group curriculum. You're going to love it. And you're investing your time so you can earn a PD certificate of attendance. So I'll be giving that away as well at the end of video 4. And just a little reminder to please turn off those distractions. This video is packed full of info, so maybe grab a notebook, silence your cell phone, and get ready to learn something. So today in video 2, I'm going to talk to you how to engage your students using group counseling curriculum. And how we can engage them is by providing a variety of fun and helpful activities. So there's 3 steps to group counseling sessions. First up, we're going to build rapport with our students. Then we're going to dig deep on the content. And lastly, we're going to reflect on what they've learned. So building rapport and making meaningful connections. You're going to use feelings checks and icebreakers to build rapport. So I love a good feelings check. If you've listened to my podcast or read any of my blog posts, you know I'm all about a feelings check. I actually have a feelings check freebie in my TPT store you can go check out later. But it sounds simple. It's just a little poster, but it's such a powerful tool. And then icebreakers. Again, you might be thinking, oh, it's a waste of time. I got a lot I want to do with my group today. But the icebreakers are a great way for your kiddos to build rapport not only with you, but with each other as well. And that trust is so important. So I encourage you to do the feelings check and the icebreakers every session. The first session is an absolute must. I think feelings check every session for sure. Icebreaker, you could do one big one at first to get to know each other. But like I said, I recommend doing a content-related one each week, and I'll give you some ideas for that here in a bit. But modeling and hearing from others is a benefit that a group offers versus individual. So in doing these feelings check, they get to hear how the other students say it, and they get to feel like it's okay for them to be vulnerable because they feel comfortable sharing in the group. Okay, so like I said, the feelings check. I love these. So let me give you some tips for how you can build rapport using a feelings check. So you're going to have a poster or visual for students to refer to. and you're going to model for students for the first time. So depending on the age of the kids you're working with, depends on how explicitly you're going to need to model this. So you want to use a consistent sentence structure, like I am feeling blank because blank. And you want to go first and model. So you would say something like, I'm feeling happy because my friends are coming to visit me this weekend. So I encourage you to do two things. First, to be honest, right? To use real life examples that are happening to you. And sometimes it makes you reflect like, what am I feeling today? Which is super important, right? But secondly, what this does is it gives you an opportunity to be vulnerable so the students feel like they're in a safe space where they can be vulnerable as well. So that being said, in the example I just gave, I did use happy, but I encourage you to use like your true feelings. So this way they feel like they can too. So for example, you could say something a little difficult, like I'm feeling sad because my grandmother passed away last year on this day and I'm thinking about it. And that kind of gives the kids permission to be like, oh wow, adults feel these feelings too. It's okay for me to share. And like I said, you want to have that how are you feeling sheet available as a visual aid for the students to reference, especially with the little guys. You might have to go over what these mean, like what the different emotions mean, and practice some emotional recognition first. But you can also use a scale of 1 to 10 for kids who have a difficult time identifying feelings. So if students are unable to identify a feeling, you could have them just range it from 1 to 10. But I think using the visual and naming a feeling is much more powerful. And I always tell kids they're not allowed to say good because they're always like, I'm good. I'm like, no, let's name a feeling. Now, with a group, it's also so important to build trust, like I mentioned, and how we can do that is with our group rules. So you need to establish some group rules during the first session. So what you can do is here's some sample group rules that I like to use, but I encourage you to have the students create them and you guys come up with them together. So during that first session, you're going to say, okay, guys, let's come up with some group rules for our group. What do you think would be some good rules for us to have? And then you're going to listen to what they say. But here's a little tip from me doing it over the years is don't just write exactly what they're saying. Instead, you're going to kind of keep in mind your ideal rules. So let me give you an example of this. For example, on my rules I have here, be respectful and be kind. So I like to do positive things like do this, be respectful, be kind, instead of don't do this, don't do this. I like to keep it positive. So a lot of the times the kids, especially the little ones, will say like, no hitting. And I'll say, okay, no hitting, that's a good one. What else? And someone else will say, no kicking. And someone else will say, no punching. And it's like, okay, so instead of writing no hitting, no kicking, no punching, those would fall under be respectful or be kind. So in my mind, I have those in mind. And I apologize, guys, if you can hear some background noise. We have some construction going on at my neighbor's house. Definitely not ideal timing, but thanks for bearing with me. So like I was saying, you have in your mind, be respectful and be kind. So you can say, yeah, those are great ideas. I think those would all fall under be respectful and be kind. And then the kids will be like, yeah. So that way, because if you have the little guys, you'll end up with 15 rules that are all super similar and that all start with don't. And then you want to explain and remind about your rules in each session, especially confidentiality. So I always include confidentiality on there. It's so important. No one is too young to learn about what confidentiality means. So you can put it in the most basic of terms. What you say in here stays in here. The only time I have to tell is if you're hurting someone, you're getting hurt, or someone's hurting you. And then you can, or you're hurting yourself, and you want to remind each session. So at the beginning of each session, we take out our group rules. We actually do this before we even do the feelings check as a reminder. Take out our group rules, we read through them, and then we get to confidentiality, and I say, does anyone remember what confidentiality means? And then someone, hands shoot up, ooh, I do. What we say in here stays in here. And you're like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it means. Now that we know that, let's move on to our feelings check. Okay, so once you do your group rules and feelings check, you're going to do these at the start of every group session. It's a great way to get the group going, and kids love routines, right? So this is a great routine, consistent structure for them to depend on. Then we'll do an icebreaker. So the point of an icebreaker is to break the ice, right? So we want kids to feel comfortable, to get to know each other better. We don't just want to sit down, because sometimes these groups are going to have heavy topics. So you don't just want to sit down and be like, all right, let's talk about our grief today. How's everybody feeling? They're like, whoa. So we need to kind of loosen everyone up a little bit, Or similarly, you don't want to say okay, Robin, can you tell us your anger triggers? That's kind of intense. So icebreakers are a good way to get everybody comfortable, get to know each other. So I have some ideas for you on how you can do these. So first up, there's types of icebreakers that are just generic icebreakers, right? So they don't really have to do with your topic of the group or the counseling content. They're just like a fun get to know you thing. So like a get to know you Jenga would be a good example of this. So, on your Jenga blocks, you can write some fun questions like, if you had $1 million, what would you buy? Or would you rather eat spaghetti for the rest of your life or pizza for the rest of your life? Fun, silly stuff like that. You can have some serious ones too, nothing too crazy, but like, what's your favorite subject in school? Or who's your favorite family member and why? Do you celebrate holidays? Which ones are important to you? Things like that. So you'll stack up the Jenga, and then the kids will play, and as they draw the blocks, they read the question and they answer. So that's a fun, simple get to know you. But then there's themed icebreakers. So I'm going to give you a few examples of these. So for example, this is a self-control one. And what a themed icebreaker is again, it's a way to get everyone comfortable and break the ice, but it has to do with a specific topic that you're learning about during that group session. So in this case, it's self-control. So if you look on the icebreaker here, each week they're going to have a different self-control related fun icebreaker, like freeze dance. So you would play some crazy music and the kids go wild and dance. And then right when you press pause, they have to freeze. So they have to demonstrate self-control. They don't know that at first, right? You're just saying, we're going to play freeze dance. But when you're finished, then you get to tie it together to your lesson and say, oh, do you guys see how that was self-control? Similarly, you could do like a Simon Says thing, a sequence challenge where they have to listen to directions and follow an order of events. Self-control bubbles, that one's fun where they blow bubbles and the kids can't pop them, so they have to practice self-control that way. So these are all examples of icebreakers you could use in a self-control group. Then there's self-regulation. So for example, I like to do a bingo game with my students when I'm introducing self-regulation. So, this is the icebreaker. We haven't got into all the nitty-gritty of self-regulation yet, but they're learning that, certain colors or certain temperatures represent certain emotions. For executive functioning, you could do a scavenger hunt. So I love doing a scavenger hunt as an icebreaker. I'll hide words around the room that are like key concepts or terms we're going to learn. So for example, in executive functioning, it would be like organization, time management, task initiation, paying attention, perseverance, words like that. So we're going to hide them around the room, and the kids go on like a scavenger hunt to find them, and then they get to say, oh, I found paying attention. And then later in the group, you'll talk about, how those all tie into what you're learning about. But it's just a cool way for them to get familiar with terms rather than you just rattling them off. And social skills. So another way you could do this, getting kids familiar with terminology and everything, is like a sentence scramble definition. So this picture you see is for a social skills group that is called social fluency. So it focuses on those more advanced social skills. And so you give the kids all these cards and they have to work together as a group to form a sentence, to form the definition basically. So, or it could be like anger management means, staying in control of my emotions even when I feel angry. So they kind of get to do a definition, but it's in a fun way. And then whatever the definition is kind of like a sneak peek of what they're going to do during that session. So these themed icebreakers are a really cool way to introduce a concept, but still making it fun. Here's another one. This is the I have, who has game. These are kind of funny, and this one's for goal setting. So basically, what the kids don't know it yet, but what this lesson will be about is how a support system, right? How you need a support system when you're goal setting. Or you could do this for anything, how you need a support system when you feel angry to help you identify your coping strategies. Or how you need a support system when you feel stressed. But we want them to identify people in their lives who are their support system. But this example is like a hiking, camping theme. So there's different things that they would take on a camping trip, and those all represent different people. So the I has, who has game, how you would play is you would tell students, you're going to give them cards, pass out the cards, and then they're going to read their cards, and it's going to go in an order. So they would say like, oh, I have lantern, who has principal? It sounds kind of silly. It's just like a silly icebreaker. But then again, in the lesson, you tie it all together. And then the person who has principal will say like, well, I have principal, who has canteen? And they're like, well, I have canteen, who has another adult at school? And then they're like, this is silly, Miss Rachel, what is this? But then we're like, oh, well, we named all these people and we named all these supplies. Similarly to how we go on a camping trip, we need our supplies. When we try to goal set or when we try to manage our emotions, we need a support system. So it's just like a funny thing you can play to get kids thinking about the topic and to introduce the topic. Okay, so that is get to know you games in general, like Jenga, some themed icebreakers. Lastly, for icebreakers, I want to talk to you about discussion cards. So discussion cards are great way to get kids talking. They don't have to be boring though. So it's not just like, okay, my turn to read, your turn to read. No, let's make them fun, right? So you can pair them with a dice where a different card corresponds to a different number on the dice, and based on what they roll, that's the card they answer. You could do it with playing cards. I love to do a game where it's like, if you draw a even card, you answer the question. If you draw an odd, you have to ask the person to your left. If you draw a face card, everyone has to answer, something like that. So you can get really creative with how to use your discussion cards. Another way you can do discussion cards is to cut them out and put them as paper strips, like on a ball. Or if you have this is like a rubber ball, but if you have like a ball that you could use dry erase markers on, like a beach ball. And beach ball is great because then you can always deflate it. It takes up very little space in your office. You could blow up a big ball, write them on a dry erase marker, and then you toss the ball, and wherever the kids' thumbs land, they get to pick between those two questions. So that's a fun way to do discussion cards as well. And with the discussion cards, if you're doing, dice or ball or however you're doing it, you can do a mix. Like if you look on this one, there's two questions. There's what do you think mindfulness is? So this is talking about for a mindfulness group. It's a topic related question, kind of like a themed icebreaker. But then there's also another one that says if you could only have one food for the rest of your life, what would you choose? So that's just a funny one. So you can do a mix of them, right? Okay, so that's all about how you can build rapport with your students by using those feelings checks during each session and by using icebreakers. Now I want to get to the good stuff, the meat and potatoes. So let's talk about how you can dig deep and really teach these kids skills that they need to succeed. So to dig deep into your students' areas of needs, you're going to use a variety of games and activities to keep them engaged. So again, you're going to introduce the concepts, kind of like you have the icebreaker, but then we're going to reinforce these concepts and make sure they really understand them. Students learn best when they're engaged. So that's why we want to keep it fun, right? We don't just want to do a bunch of worksheets, but let's do stuff like games and role play and charades and all kinds of stuff. And it makes it fun for you too, right? So I don't understand how teachers, like secondary teachers, teach the same lesson over and over. That like blows my mind. I'm like, they've got to get bored, right? Well, similarly, we get bored with small groups. If you're like, oh, it's my self-control group again, done this activity before. But if you have like a lot to choose from and you make it really fun and exciting, then it's fun for you too. And the kids can totally sense that. So I've got a lot of activity ideas here for you. I wanted to give these to you, so take some notes so you can use these with your own students. I hope you love these as much as I do. So first up, interactive worksheets. So I just said I hate worksheets, and I do. But interactive worksheets involve like some cutting and pasting, right? And they make it a little more fun. So I'm going to give you some examples. This is from a self-control group. You could do something where they have to talk about choices and consequences. So you would have like an event, and then they have to pick, different choices they could make, and then the consequence of those choices. You'll notice this one's super visual. That's because it's for the little guys, but you could, tweak this any way you wanted. Another idea of an interactive worksheet is an anger plan. And you're going to have students select which coping strategies they would use, and they'll cut and paste them, and then who they could talk to for support, and then they'll cut and paste those. And then they also have like an area for extra information for their plan. So it could be anything like they could write their strategies again, or they could say something like, oh, I need my plan more on weekends when I'm with mom, or something like that. So it's a really cool way for them to get a plan and kind of like some ownership and accountability of being in control of their emotions. Then discussion activities. So discussion activities are a little different than discussion cards. So I have a few examples for you here. First up, this is for a like cyber safety digital citizenship group. And it's talking about the effects of social media. So this is kind of for that upper elementary, middle school age. But we're going to show like some fake Instagram posts here, and then they're going to roll a dice to discuss it. So things like, do you think following certain accounts could be bad for your self-esteem? So you're getting the kids to discuss, but there's something they're discussing about. It's not simply the dice or the cards. Similarly, here's one for anger management for little guys. They have an angry monster, and then it's like a craft on the inside. They can kind of write what makes them angry, and then they'll use the dice to discuss, is it hard for you to control your anger? What makes you feel angry? Another example of a discussion activity is a social story. So you can type up a story about a student. Try to make the characters super relatable to the kids that are in your group. And then you're going to have a dice where after you read the story, you're going to say, like, what advice would you give them? Or what would you do if you were that person? Or how could they have made better choices? Things like that. Okay, the third activity idea I have for you are sorting activities. So I love a good sorting activity. It's a great way to, reinforce understanding. So like a sort and paste. So this one is for little guys for self-control strategies. So they're choosing strategies they want to try and then strategies they don't want to try. So this is super helpful, right? Because we can use this information and then tell their teacher, like, oh, they said they don't want to count to 10. So if you tell them to do that, that's probably not going to work. But they do want to go on a walk or read a book. So try those strategies next time. Here's another sorting activity. This one's fun. This is from a stress group, and it's talking about how there's avoidable and unavoidable stress. And so the kids, there's some pre-filled ones, but then they're writing on there also some of their stressors. So they're writing their stressors. So the ones that are avoidable stay on the outside of the headphones because, they can put on their headphones and they won't get through. But then the unavoidable ones still kind of make their way through. So again, this is another way you could do a sorting activity. Here's another example of a sorting activity you could do. This one's for a friendship group. And so it's talking about like bad seeds for making new friends and good seeds for making new friends. It's plant themed or flower themed. So you're going to have different seeds and the kids get to sort like, ooh, is this like a good way to make a friend, bossing them around? Would that be a good seed for making a new friend or a bad seed for making a new friend? Or being honest and kind. Oh, that would be a good seed for making a new friend. So you can get really creative with how you sort things. I love to do sorting activities. Next up, flip books. So flip books are really cool too. You can do them a lot of different ways. I'm going to show you a few different examples. This one is if you're for like an anger management group, they're talking about how you bubble up like a volcano. So you're trying to figure out like the initial thing and then what happens as a consequence and then what happens as a result. So they're kind of filling in the different areas of the volcano there. And this one is a little different. This one is for grief. It's more of a little booklet. And so the kids are writing, under each tab, their different feelings about grief. So what's something that's scary about their grief? What's something that makes them angry about their loss? Or what makes them sad? What's something that kind of makes them happy? And another example of a flip book, this one, that's like we were talking about before from the stressor one, but you can use like those rings, and then it could just be like a review of the material that they've learned, or they can fill in some examples as well. And role play. So this is one of my favorite things about small groups is because you have more than one student with you, but you don't have quite as big of a size as a class, it's a perfect opportunity to practice skills through role play. And I feel like the kids really resonate with the concept when they can learn by doing. So instead of just hearing about it or writing about it, they get to practice it like it was in real life. So here's some examples of some role play cards. And then similarly, this is for practicing I statements. So the kids would roll the dice and then get different combinations, and then they could act that out. So, act out feeling frustrated when someone doesn't listen to you. And then they get to use the I statement. So they would come up with a little skit where someone's ignoring them, and then that person has to use the I statement and say, I feel frustrated when you don't listen to me because it isn't very nice. Next time, can you please listen to me? So you can get really creative with the role play, especially in like a social skills group. This is really awesome and like a really great way to make progress with your kiddos. And even in groups where you're teaching them coping strategies, like we can't just expect them to hear about a coping strategy and then to implement it in real life. Like they need to practice. So you can role play, act out. Let's act out. What does it feel like to practice mindfulness? What does it look like if you're going to go ask your teacher for a break? Like let's practice these scenarios. And then we have crafts. So they do get a little messy and take a little more time, but I love doing crafts because if you think about your own experiences from when you were in school, the things that were most memorable were like those fun things, right? Like I remember doing all kinds of crafts. I don't really remember all of the actual like lessons that I was taught, but I remember the fun things that we got to do. So we want to make our small group fun. So here's an example of a craft you could do. This one was making fake s'mores, or you could also make real s'mores. And this was a way to talk about goal setting with your students, like different layers of goal setting. Another craft you could do would be like a fortune teller or cootie catcher. So have the kids do like a foldable, and then underneath is different questions that you want them to ask each other, like, which coping strategies do you want to try, or what's something that makes you lose self-control? And so they can play those. So they make the craft together and then they get to play it and they can ask each other questions that way. Next up, interactive notebooks. So I love to use interactive notebooks after you do like an icebreaker that's related. So the icebreaker kind of introduces the concept, and then the interactive notebook is like the follow-up. So again, this is kind of like a craft. It takes a little cutting and pasting and a little time, but they're really cool. And then if you do one each session, at the end of your group, your kids will have this notebook full of these like foldables and cool things where they can refer back to. So for example, here's one where they're like naming an emotion, and then they're figuring out the underlying reasons for that emotion. So, if they get angry and blow up at school, why? Like, what are all the reasons that we're building up to it? Kind of like the iceberg analogy. Or here's another example of an interactive notebook. This one is they're doing some goal setting, like a planning backwards map for executive functioning. So, the end date and then how they're going to get there. And then they have on the left-hand side there, it's kind of covered up, but this is almost like a self-assessment in a way, but it's an executive functioning like check-in, seeing like how strong do you feel in these areas. So when it comes to organization, color up to how strong you feel. And this is, I don't even know where to start, to I feel okay, to I'm a pro at this. Or if it comes to planning, how good do you feel about it? So you can get really creative with these. If you have some artistic kiddos, they're going to love it. And here's another one. This is a foldable inside of interactive notebook that if you look, it says takeaway. So this would be good for a last session. They're going to write their takeaway, from the group overall underneath there. And lastly, board games. So I love board games. Again, this is something really cool you can do in groups. I mean, an individual session, you could play one-on-one with you as the other player, but it's not nearly as fun. And in a class, it's a little difficult to do. But a small group, 5 or 6 kids, perfect for a board game. And, make it fun. Like they land on certain spaces, they get to move forward. Certain spaces, they have to move back. And then, of course, you want this to be related to the content. So, I like to do examples like, oh, you got angry and you punched the wall, move back 2 spaces. Or, oh, you got angry and you took deep breaths, move forward 3 spaces. So as they're playing the game, it's giving them examples of a concept you want them to learn. Or you could make these more discussion-based, like based on where they land, they have to share something. And here's another one. This is for growth mindset. So, for example, one's like read the positive thought and move forward 2 spaces. But then the other one says examples, again, like you asked for extra help from your teacher instead of giving up, move forward. Okay, guys, so I hope you love those activities, ideas. That was kind of a lot, but I hope you're feeling inspired, like, ooh, I could do that, my kids would love that. Okay, so now I want to give you some bonus ideas, and these are some ideas that will help you introduce the concepts and track progress. So I'm going to share with you like some posters and some progress trackers, and I'll give you some examples in a moment here. But basically what this does is it introduces the concepts. So you would use like a poster to introduce the concept each week, and then you could reinforce it. So you refer to the poster. Oh, do you remember last week we learned about this? Today we're going to talk about this. And a progress tracker is a way to track your sessions. So this way kids know how many sessions they've completed and then how many they have left. Now, not only does this track their progress, but it kind of incentivizes attendance because the kids want to be there, when you're saying, oh, we did this week, let's put on our sticker for this week. Like I said, I'll give an example in a moment. But both the posters and the progress trackers serve as visual aids that you could hang up in your office or wherever you're meeting with your kids so they can be reminded of everything they're learning in the group. So here's some examples of some introduction posters. So on the left here, this is from that goal setting group that has to do with like the hiking camping theme. And this is a compass. So it's talking about, when we go hiking, our compass helps us find our direction. We need to figure out where we want to go when we're goal setting. What goals do you want to set? Why do you want to set these goals? So it's not really meant for them to write in. This is just like a poster you would hang up, and you're going to have these discussions with the kids. So you're introducing it. So that week is like Compass Week. So that's kind of a cool way for them to have a theme. And I love a good theme when it comes to a small group because I think it just makes it, again, more memorable, more engaging for the students. And then you can use a lot of analogies, which seem to work really well at the elementary level. And then a tornado. So this one is from a self-control group that's weather themed. And it's saying that tornadoes are like out of control. And then sometimes like a tornado, our negative thoughts can spiral out of control. So it's talking about catastrophic thinking. So then you can see the progress trackers that relate to those 2 groups. So on the right-hand side, we have that goal setting one. There's your compass. So each week they're going to, stick that sticker or paste that little piece of paper onto the progress tracker so you can see, oh, look, we already have 5 up there. It looks like we've already met 5 times Here's our 6th time. Today we're learning about the compass. We have 2 left. We're going to have 8 sessions total. So it's a way for kids to kind of stay in the loop and be like, oh, okay, we've already done this many. This is how many we have left. And it, in a way, prepares them for the group termination eventually. And on the left-hand side, that's that weather-themed one. So it's kind of showing you what you're focusing on each session. So like that tornado, that was session 4. In session 5, it looks like it's going to be something about temperature. Again, these are all analogy that you can use to explain different concepts to your students. So the posters are a way to kind of introduce the topics and use a fun theme and analogy to explain them. And then the progress trackers are a way to track, the progress, how many sessions you have remaining. And in a way, it incentivizes attendance because kids are like, ooh, I missed the sunshine one. What did we do on Sunshine Week? So it kind of motivates them to attend the group. Okay, so dig deep. That was a lot. I feel like we did dig deep, guys. So we talked about how to build rapport using feelings check and icebreakers, how to dig deep with our actual content and the fun activities that we're doing with students to reinforce concepts. And now we're going to briefly talk about how to reflect. So students need to reflect on their session content and growth, and you can use journals to do this. So journals will prompt the students to self-reflect. So with journals, you can do, 2 things. You can keep them open-ended, or you can have more of like a fill-in-the-blank or structured journal. I recommend you allow about 7 to 10 minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the end of each session for the kids to journal. I am guilty of getting caught up in an activity, and then I'm like, oh, in your journal, and it's only like 2 minutes. And you're not going to get as much thoughtful responses with that limited time. So you want to make sure you're carving out a chunk of time for the kids to reflect on what they've learned and their progress in general. So here's some examples of journal reflections you could do. I like to have a little prompt, and of course the prompt is related, to that week's session. So for example, on the right-hand side it says, do you like your body? Would you change anything about it? So that's from a self-esteem group, and in that session we were talking about body image. So then they're going to reflect on, body image after learning about it. And this other one's the first session, so it's more general. So it's talking about how do you feel about being in a grief group? So maybe they feel nervous, maybe they feel embarrassed, maybe they're mad that they're in it. And then what does grief mean? So the, objective for that week was to introduce the definition of grief. So we're trying to see if they understand. And here's some other examples. These are more structured in a way that they have a question that talks about what they learned in the session, but then they also have like a general check-in of how it's going in their area of need. So for example, on the left, this one is about self-control. So it's talking about the support system and if you've asked people for help before. So that's what they talked about in group that week. But then on the bottom, it says talk about a time you showed self-control this week. And that bottom piece is consistent across each journal in that group. So each week they're going to talk about a time they showed self-control. So then you can go back at the end of the group and look and see, oh, did they get better at showing self-control? Were they doing it more frequently? It's interesting to see. Similarly, on the right-hand side, this one is about stress. So it's talking about priorities and scheduling your priorities because that's what they learned about in the session. But in the bottom there, it says, are you feeling stressed about anything today? It's just kind of a little check-in that they get to write, yes, I'm feeling stressed about this, or no, I'm not. And that question remains the same across sessions. So then at the end of the group, again, you can check and see how their stress changed over the course of the group. And then I wanted to show you 2 more ways you could use journals. On the left-hand side, this one's from a self-esteem group where in their mirror they were kind of drawing and writing who they are. But the journal in this one is directly related to the activity. So it just says who or what is in your mirror. So they would have to have done the activity for that journal to make sense. So you can tie it into a specific activity that you did during that session. That's an option. On the right-hand side, this is more of an interactive fill-in-the-blank kind of journal. So it has like a quiz in it on one page, and then it's a doodle journal so they can color in everybody. And then on the other page, it's giving them like prompts for, listing out who their accountability partners are. So you can make it really open-ended, or you can make it, really interactive and fill in the blank. It's totally up to you. So now we've talked about building rapport, using those engaging activities, and using that reflection piece. And all of this comes together to help impact more students. So using those engaging icebreakers, activities, and journals allows students to really understand the concepts and to reach their counseling goals, which is the whole point, right? So this allows you as the counselor to feel confident that not only are your sessions fun, but purposeful. And that's the balance we're all after, right? We don't want it to be boring. We want kids to want to come to counseling and for it to be a fun, positive thing. But there's also a purpose and a reason why they're there. So based on what I've just been sharing with you, I want you to think about it. Which part of group counseling do you want to improve the most? Are you trying to improve your icebreakers to introduce concepts? Are you trying to improve your games and activities that you're doing with kids? Or are you trying to improve your journal reflection? So think about that. And I have 2 more tips for you when it comes to engaging those students during group sessions. First up, you just want to provide plenty of examples, encouragement, and permission to fail. So you want to make your group a safe space for students because, not only are they saying these things in front of you, but they're saying these things in front of the other kids too, right? So we want to make sure we give lots of examples so everyone feels supported and clear on what they're supposed to do. And encouragement, like, oh, you're doing a great job, or I love this example. And permission to fail. If they, mess up one of the activities or don't get something right, that's totally okay. And that's how we learn and grow together. So you want to remind them of that. Secondly, I encourage you to prepare your session materials in advance. So not only does this take some stress off you, but students can tell and they can sense your excitement about the session. So if you come in all frazzled and you're like, oh gosh, what are we doing today? Oh yeah, we're going to do this cooperation thing and then we're going to do a role play. Kids are like, cool. But if you come in and you're like, oh my gosh, guys, you're going to love the activity I have for you today. Everyone get out a pen and paper. This is what's first. Then they're like, whoa, she's pumped. This is probably going to be fun. And then they're going to respond, based on your cues. So I know you're overwhelmed, but if you can, try to squeeze in some time to really prepare your session materials in advance, I think it will go a long way. That being said, hopefully you can reuse some of these session materials so it's not like you're prepping every single time. Okay guys, so that is video 2. That one was packed full of info on how you can engage your students using your group counseling curriculum. I hope you found it super duper helpful.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.